So it looks like our attendees are slowly filing in. And so we're going to get this started in just a few minutes to give you all time to settle in. Welcome to the Chemical Engineering Graduate Admissions Information Session. I think now is probably a good time to start. We have a good number of attendees so far. So in order to get us started, I would like to introduce you all to Professor Paula Hammond, the department head for MIT's Chemical Engineering Department.
Hello, everyone, and it's wonderful to have you here. We are really excited to tell you about grad admissions in our department. Next slide, Melanie. I'd like to introduce everyone here on the Zoom who will be talking to you and answering questions. So as Melanie said, I'm Professor Paula Hammond. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm the department head in chemical engineering at MIT. I'd also like to introduce Melanie Charette, who got us started here. She is our academic administrator and runs our student office in the department. Professor Brad Olson is here as our graduate admissions co-chair. And he actually runs our admissions committee and is a great person to answer a number of your questions. Caitlin Steer is our communication lab manager. Caitlin actually helps us run our CHAMP program, which really prepares students to create a very effective application. And she's going to be talking near the end about how you can do that for our MIT application. And we also have Matt Sweeney, who is another of our MIT student office members. He's our graduate academic coordinator and takes care of all of our graduate students here in the department. So with that, let's move on to the next. We're going to talk about how to apply, but before that, I'd like to give you a little bit of an introduction to the department. Next slide. So a really big welcome from MIT Chemical Engineering. Our department is dynamic. It has a large number of academic programs that help define the future of chemical and biological engineering, materials, energy, environmental and sustainability applications. All of these are represented by members of our faculty. We have a very diverse group of faculty, and this is something we're really proud of because we get to hear and learn from a broad range of perspectives that our faculty bring to the table. We also have a broad and diverse graduate student body, and this is something we truly benefit from because by learning from each other, we can actually understand new and better ways to think about and solve problems. And in many cases, think about new problems that we haven't thought about before. So we have a huge value, place a huge value on diversity, a huge value on respect, and on our interpersonal interactions. And I think that makes this a wonderful place because it's important to us that graduate students thrive in our environment. Next slide. So let me describe the degrees in our graduate program. The PhD is that classic doctorate in chemical engineering. It's a research-based degree. And essentially you have your initial core classes in the first semester. After that, you choose a research lab and you take a deep dive into your research project. That research project will provide you with thorough grounding and all of the fundamental principles of ChemE, but it will also provide you a way of applying those ideas of chemical engineering to a specific research area that you're excited about. And it's a very intensive research experience. We also have the PhD CEP, and this is actually a degree that was innovated here at MIT. It combines the doctorate in chemical engineering with the master's in chemical engineering practice in a unique way. A PhD CEP student comes in, takes the core classes with everyone else in the first semester, chooses a research project or topic that can be covered in a more condensed time period, typically 3 years. and then spends their final year at the MIT Sloan School of Management. There is an option to pay for a second year at the Sloan School to receive an MBA along with the PhD CEP. The PhD CEP program builds a really solid foundation of industrial experience, research and business. It prepares you for a fast launch into leadership, and it requires admission to both programs. Now, the Master's in Chemical Engineering Practice is a very unique master's program, which allows hands-on real-world experience in industrial settings. In that case, students, again, complete their graduate level coursework, and then they have a full 13-week period where they are at industrial sites working in teams on real-life industrial problems. And this is actually something that is greatly valued by our students. Next slide. We have a number of interdisciplinary programs, and I'll go over them very briefly. We have the Leaders for Global Operations program. This is a 2-year dual degree program at MIT, and it allows you to get your master's in engineering in the engineering field of your that you've been admitted to, and your MBA at the Sloan School of Management. And within that, you actually hone your technical skills, you solve problems that are really operations and technology problems, and have a large focus on manufacturing. Now, the second program is the program in Polymers and Soft Matter, or PPSM. And in that program, you essentially apply to the core department and then apply to PPSM from within that department. And your core curriculum will be a 1-year period in which you're taking intensive polymer science programs that are offered by faculty across the campus. And you can select a research topic from amongst all of the polymer associated faculty or affiliated faculty, and a qualifying exam based on that. And you then take your host department's core classes. Computational Science and Engineering PhD program is another opportunity for you to specialize, but this time in a computation-related field of your choice. There's, again, a series of focused coursework and a doctoral thesis, which includes a range of different areas, including chemical engineering. So it's great to have an idea of where our graduates go. And it turns out that we have a large number of graduates who go to academia. In fact, out of the top 10 ranked CHEMI departments, 16% of them hold a degree from MIT. And at Caltech, Wisconsin, and Delaware, it's above 20%. We have a large number of our graduate students who go on to industry and have very exciting jobs at a range of different companies. You see a short list here, but it's a much longer list, and includes small, startup, and big companies. And startups are actually one of the things that we see our students do. A number of them get excited about the work they're doing. They find that the innovation is translational and can have real impact in the world. And so we have a number of students who start their own companies. So now we're going to talk about how to apply. And to do that, I'm going to pass things over to Melanie.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to take over right here. So this is going to be a very bare bones presentation of what you would need to do in order to apply for MIT chemical engineering programs. Our application opens in early September, and materials are due by the deadline. This year, the deadline is November 20th. Typically, it would be around mid-November. And what is required in the application itself, these are the things that you should expect to be providing. So personal information about yourself, your fields of interests, letters of recommendations from 3, professors or supervisors that you've worked with, scanned copies of your college transcripts, English language scores for international applicants, and an application fee of $75. In addition to that, we also request that students submit a CV or a resume and answers to all of our short essay questions, which come in a little bit later, and Professor Olson will talk about those. It's very important to note that we do not accept any additional documentation above what is required. For example, if you are interested in sending us your publications, please don't. Instead, leave the information in your CV so that we can go back to it that way. That will be the most effective way to present the information to our committee. So some of the required documentation that folks ask about a lot, we have the GRE scores. So the GRE scores are no longer accepted or considered as part of the PhD and the MSCEP program applications. If you do submit a GRE score, it will immediately be removed from your application in order to avoid having bias in the admissions committee. PhD CEP applicants are recommended to submit their unofficial scores, as the GRE scores are used when Sloan evaluates your application. And the chemical engineering committee does not actually ever get to see those GRE scores. They are only kept confidential for the Sloan review. Another thing we usually get a lot of questions about is the English language exams. So we do have waivers for applicants from certain countries. Waivers are also provided to applicants who have attended a 4-year undergraduate university at one of the institutions, or at an institution in these said countries, that provides primary instruction in English. And if at any time you're not sure if you fall into those categories, then you would reach out to us and let us know if you have any questions, and we can let you know what is required. And then finally, your letters of recommendation, which we do want you to know that the letters can arrive after the deadline. So even though our deadline is November 20th, we understand that sometimes faculty and supervisors need a little bit more time. So they can arrive after the deadline, but until your application is complete, it will not be reviewed by the committee. If at any point we are still missing a letter of recommendation, and you have not been able to collect it, this will be something that I would reach out to you and let you know so that we can try to complete your application and get it reviewed. Another big thing that comes up a lot is fee waivers. As you know, the fee for admission to MIT Chemical Engineering is $75, but the Office of Graduate Education offers fee waivers for US citizens and permanent residents who demonstrate financial hardship, are current or former members of the US military, or who have participated in special fellowship programs or MIT-sponsored diversity programs. So I've listed just the eligibility requirements, and the actual process of requesting the waiver goes through the Office of Graduate Education, and we also link to that on our website in case you would like more information. A few other things to keep in mind. Chemical engineering only admits students for fall starts. We do not admit students to start in spring or summer sessions. So please keep that in mind as you're making your plans for graduate school. Applicants may only apply to 1 degree program in chemical engineering. So if you're applying for the MSCP, you will not be considered for the PhD if you are not accepted. Same goes for if you're applying for the PhD and you are not admitted, you will not be considered automatically for the master's program because they are reviewed by separate committees. Applicants may apply to other departments at MIT. So be aware that if you wanted to apply for some other program, you could still do that. However, application materials are not shared between MIT departments. So you will want to make sure that all of your appropriate materials for chemical engineering is sent to us, and that any other materials for other departments are sent appropriately to them. And once the whole process is over, admitted students are invited to campus to get to know more about MIT, meet faculty, current graduate students, visit the Cambridge area. And that is going to be the primary source of information collecting when you are making your decision as to where you would like to attend graduate school. And now I'm going to push this over to Professor Olson, who will talk to you a little bit more about the admissions committee perspective.
Thanks very much, Melanie. So I want to start by just introducing briefly how we review applications to give you a perspective on how our applications are evaluated. So first thing we do after the application window closes is screen all the applications for completeness, and we start reviewing them pretty quickly. So even though letters of recommendation can come in late, we'd emphasize get it in as soon as possible. Typically, we assign our applications to readers before Thanksgiving. They're not assigned based on research area, but they're distributed sort of randomly, and then we get back reviews. from our readers, and based on that, we select candidates to interview. So we have sort of a two-stage process. First, evaluation of your written application, and then an interview. Interview invitations typically go out in December and the first half of January, and the order is governed really by how fast the applications are read. After the interviews, candidates are discussed by our admissions committee, and admissions decisions are made. Typically, we close the process in early February. So what is the interview like is a question people often ask. So if you're selected for an interview, you'll receive an email from the admissions committee, usually me in the past several years, and inviting you to interview and providing you with a lot more detailed information. The interviews are about 20 minutes in length, and they're conducted remotely over Zoom with some attention paid to the fact that people are in very different time zones, and we try to schedule around that. The next, please. The candidates sign up for your own interview time slot. So we have a sign up system. It's basically first come, first served. Next. And basically you'll be sent a list of questions, kind of discussion topics that we'll discuss with you. And then at the actual interview time, 2 faculty members will welcome you on Zoom. And sometimes they run a little late. So we have a few that start a few minutes late, just something to be cognizant of. And Melanie, Matt, and other people are often there to help with technical issues. Different people usually read the application and interview the application. So we have many different folks participating in taking a look at each candidate. Next, please. So our review process, we pride ourselves on developing a holistic review process. And as part of this, our department has had long deliberations and discussions of what it means to be excellent as a grad student. And I'll show you, we settled on 6 criteria on the next slide. And it's these 6 criteria that we use to evaluate all of the applications. All of the criteria are important pillars of excellence for us in graduate study. I want to emphasize there are no score cutoffs or grade cutoffs in our holistic process, and we do not weight one criteria more important than the other, because that would also not be holistic review. So we've worked very hard on trying to develop a process where we look at many different dimensions of each candidate in order to decide who to make offers of admission to. Next slide, please. So our 6 criteria, the first one is excellence in chemical engineering fundamentals. So essentially your core knowledge of chemical engineering. And the definition provides a little specificity. The second one is your analytical and scientific preparation, basically your background in science and math. Relevant really to your area of interest, because different candidates have different interests. Someone interested in biotech research versus someone interested in polymer research or machine learning research may have different emphasis in their scientific preparation, and that's 100% okay, right? What we want to know is how excellent are you in your chosen area? Next, please. So drive and persistence. So what's your commitment to education, to research, overcoming challenges? All of these things are extremely important to us. Next. Excellence in research. Of course, PhDs are research degrees primarily. So this is very important for the PhDs. And sort of what involvement have you had in research or application of the scientific method? Doesn't necessarily have to be a formal lab experience. But talk to us about those experiences that you've had and how they've demonstrated your skills and motivated you for study. Next, please. Also, next is a candidate's character. So we are very focused. Actually, the number 1 most important skill, according to our faculty, is integrity. And leadership potential, ability to work on teams, and to exist and really thrive within a diverse community and multicultural environment are all very important to us. And last is communication skills, something that's obviously very important in all of our different degrees. The ability to communicate written and orally in English, both with technical and non-technical subjects is extremely important. So everything we do is really focused on looking at these 6 criteria as part of our holistic process. So when you're preparing an application, my advice as the admissions chair, and Caitlin will talk so much more about this, but I encourage you, everything you do, ask, how does your application address our criteria, right? So if people say, well, should I list this? Should I put that? I think that's the question I would ask. Does this address our criteria for excellence? Right, so I want to expound on 3 particular points. One is chemi fundamentals, right? So this in particular refers to the subjects that we listed of thermodynamics, transport phenomena, chemical kinetics, and mathematics up to differential equations. So people often ask us, well, can I be admitted from with an undergraduate degree other than chemi? And the answer is absolutely yes. And so we encourage you then to think about how your academic preparation has given you relevant knowledge in these 4 particular areas, and to explain to us where you got that background knowledge so that it's clear to us that you have this strong background in the fundamentals. Next, please. So analytical and scientific preparation, as I mentioned, this is very much specific to your field. And another kind of note is that we particularly focus often on the quantitative aspects of analytical and scientific preparation, right? So this doesn't mean you have to code, this doesn't mean doing theory, but show us how you apply quantitative thinking in whatever you do, whatever field you're in. I think it's rare to encounter our graduate students across every field tend to have this very quantitative bent. It's something we're very excited about. So show us how that's exciting to you as well. And then final point I wanted to make about is excellence in research. People often ask us, and I think there's some questions on the slide already, is research experience required? The answer is no, formal research experience is not required, nor are publications required, but obviously it's a great thing, right? So whatever experience you have using scientific inquiry, tell us about it. Tell us how that has demonstrated your skills, and tell us why that indicates to you that a PhD is a great degree for you in particular. PhD really has the biggest research emphasis, and this is the most important there. All right, next slide, please. So I want to emphasize research area is not a criteria. Some people say, well, do you prefer candidates in a certain area? No, we prefer candidates who meet our 6 criteria for excellence. We do obviously a little bit like a class with diverse interests. So we're not going to admit only polymer people, unfortunately for me. But we do very much have balance, but we look for the best people irrespective of research area. Listing specific faculty you would like to work for, research centers or things like this is not really of any value to you, so don't feel obligated to do so. The one exception is if all the people you're interested in aren't in our department, then we would say maybe apply to multiple departments at MIT. Sometimes this happens, and so we would encourage you to then assess whether it's good to also apply to one of our colleague departments at MIT as well. Next slide, please. All right, finally, I want to say, I think this is my last slide. I want to say a few words about a letter of reference and what a good letter of reference will do. And this is one of the biggest challenges for you as a candidate, is selecting those reference writers in a way that it maximally supports your application. Right. So a good letter of reference will explain to us as the evaluators how you are great in each of our 6 admissions criteria. So you really want this letter to advocate on your behalf, but with respect to these specific things. Right. To do that well, the letter needs to be written by someone who knows you well and someone who's willing to take the time to write a good letter. Right. It can't be done in a few minutes. So cultivate relationships with these folks, mentors, people in your network from an early stage. Typically, we would like these letters to be written by people with experience in the evaluation of candidates. The reason that matters to us is people who have been doing this for a bit typically have a richer context for the letter, and they can provide a more nuanced view and a more powerful advocacy for you as a candidate. Right. Typically, what this means is that most people choose predominantly faculty members to write their letters. Industry letters are often very good too. It's best if you choose someone from industry who has experience in recommending candidates. We strongly recommend for this reason a minimum of 2 letters from faculty members, with possibly 3 from faculty or possibly 2 from faculty, 1 from industry. I think both of these work fine, but we strongly recommend a minimum of 2 from faculty. We strongly discourage letters written by, for example, your graduate student research mentor, postdoc in the laboratory, or an industrial person who barely knew you. None of these are going to carry a lot of weight or authority with the admissions committee. And while they're not strictly speaking detrimental to your application, you lose the chance for powerful advocacy. And you'd really like these letters to be as powerful as possible. I'd like to recommend asking your letter writers in advance, at least 30 days. This is considered a common courtesy, so please do that. You won't get a good letter with 5 days advance notice. And provide them information about you, like your resume, a summary of your accomplishments, maybe the answers you've drafted to our short answer questions, to help them really have the full context that they can use to write the most powerful letter on your behalf. All right, and I'll pass it now over to Caitlin, who's going to give you some fantastic information about how to actually write some of these sections of our application effectively.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. In the next few minutes, I'm going to cover some high-impact communication strategies for demonstrating your match for a particular graduate program or a program, with additional pointers for applying to our department. Matching goes both ways. The department should be interested in you, and you should be interested in them. And your application should make this match explicit. There are 3 steps in advocating your case. Research the program and identify your match. Select experiences that highlight this match and translate them into concrete qualifications, and then connect the dots between them. Make the so what or take away of these experiences obvious and connect them to the program criteria. Next. Successful applications show how you are a match for MIT Chemie. This starts with some research and reflection. Identify your strengths and goals. Identify the program, vision, needs, and criteria. Consider the overlap and highlight attributes that distribute your match. Next. There are a lot of resources to help you in this detective work. One of them is this very webinar you're in right now, but you can also read the program's website. What language does a program use to describe themselves? And you want to echo that language in your responses. Next. A department's mission is a particularly fruitful area to look. Next. Read the mission statement closely and highlight attributes that resonate with your strengths and goals. Maybe you're passionate about interdisciplinary problems and how they interface with society. Next. Another critical place to look for attributes is to touch on our selection criteria. Professor Olson did a very good job of covering this. There's a lot in here, and I really encourage you to look at it closely and consider how these attributes might map to our short answer questions. Next. Did you engage in a research project where you demonstrated independence and took a finding in a new direction? How have you contributed to your community? Have you presented your work anywhere or communicated with the public? This is the place to start brainstorming experiences that fit the prompt, our core admissions criteria, and mission. Next. And this match should be carried throughout your entire package, as Professor also mentioned, including language you use in your CV. And tell your recommenders to touch on this, our evaluation criteria, and connect the dots for them and experiences that you think highlight these qualities. And this will help build your brand. Next. And while this brand is personal, your emphasis should be technical in nature. And this is an important thing to keep in mind for all your grad applications. While some programs call for personal statements, with rare exceptions, this is not the place to relay childhood experiences. The intent of these responses is to demonstrate your readiness for grad school. You want to take care in selecting your experiences because this is your evidence. What experiences led you to develop your skill set and passions? Where have you demonstrated leadership and collaboration? Include research, teaching, and relevant extracurriculars, and state concrete achievements and outcomes with awards, discoveries, and publications. Next. Once you identify these experiences, you want to take it a step further and try to quantify them. How you want to show that concrete impact. How many people were on your team? How many protocols did you develop? How many people were in competition for a certain award you got? As a TA, how often did you meet with your students? Describe actions, not just your internal mental or emotional state. Next. So here are some examples of how that might look. You don't want to say, I got involved with organic chemistry projects. Instead, you want to say, I designed and synthesized 3 different molecular wire configurations in order to optimize electrostatic properties. That is concrete, quantitative, and specific. You want to say, not, I learned about enzymes in cancer. You want to say, I quantified the kinetics of 3 enzymes implicated in cancer onset. Next. So once you start fleshing out these experiences, it's important to emphasize the takeaway. Explain, so what? How has that experience shaped you and made you ready for grad school? Why was this experience important to your growth as a scientist? What does it say about your potential? It might feel obvious to you, but you really want to be explicit with your audience. Next. And as you might have guessed, kind of listening to these details, this process of conveying your match through relevant experiences means your applications should not be cookie cutter. You really need to invest time into customizing this fit for each institution. And while our program has some unique prompts for your short answers, I think you'll find that you're not starting from scratch here. Next. Our questions will likely feel familiar, and you'll be thinking about them as you're thinking through the elements in a personal statement or statement of purpose. Next. Our short answers convey many of these same sections broken out. Next. Next. I hope this provides some useful tips for you to get started. You can explore so many more science communication resources for grad school applications on our Chemie Communication Lab website. And you can check out in particular a personal statement example here. There's an authentic annotated example from a successful 2021 applicant to our program. Next. You can also find tips on CVs, but remember to please defer to our admissions criteria for the exact formatting requirements, including DOIs. Next. Finally, I just wanted to touch on our Chemie application mentorship program. You can find a mentor to guide you through our grad admissions process. This is a volunteer-based and graduate student-run program that supports applicants from communities that have been historically underrepresented in higher education. Our mentees are paired with current grad students who can answer questions about MIT Chemie and provide application guidance. And this is an entirely voluntary program and does not impact your decision. We'll be accepting requests through October and making pairs weekly. Please fill out our Google form to sign up. That's everything on my end, Melanie.
So just a quick wrap up, just reminding you all, if you have any questions about any of the material that's been covered today, please feel free to email us at chemigrad@mit.edu. We are excited to hear from you. We want to know how we can make this better. And in all fairness to applicants, we actually discourage MIT Chemie faculty from answering admissions questions. So please forward all of your requests and questions directly to the administrative office, as the faculty themselves typically do not respond to those. And I think now what we would like to do is kind of skip over to the FAQ. We do have a Slido set up. Matt has put it in the chat so that you all can see what kind of questions we have. And Matt will read those out to us so that we can answer all of your questions.
Okay, great. I can get started here. First question should be fairly easy. Will these slides be posted? They are very helpful.
Yes, I will post the slides. I will also be posting the recording for folks to be able to do that. And then also we will take the Q&As and we'll have them written out in a document so that you'll be able to search through them. And also note that a lot of these questions may also be answered on our FAQ, which is currently updated on the website. So don't be worried if we don't know the answer today, but we will get you the answer later.
The next question is, how important are publications as an admissions criteria?
I guess that's probably for me, right? So obviously having publications in research is a great thing. And so, you should definitely list them, and we especially encourage you to talk about what your specific role in each publication was and about all the positive contributions you made. The way publications contribute obviously is by testifying to things like communication skills and excellence in research, a couple of our criteria. There are many ways to demonstrate excellence in these areas, and so publications are by no means required. I would say that many of our admitted candidates each year do not have publications, and many have publications. So it's certainly not a requirement for admission, but it is definitely also a positive thing.
Okay, next question. Do we need to mention high school details as well in the resume?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Matt?
Oh, sorry. Do we need to mention high school details in the resume?
Please do not.
Okay, next question. If I get admitted for the PhD chemical engineering program, how would I know if I would get allotted the PI/lab of my choice?
I'll take a stab at that. All MIT graduate students, when they're admitted, are admitted on fellowships, and they don't join a lab until after they've arrived on campus and spent the first semester taking classes and spending time meeting with a number of different faculty. We actually require that graduate students meet with at least 6 faculty in the department to understand what their research is about, so that everyone has a good sense of what the possibilities are. And then later on in the semester, we have a date by which faculty can commit to students. And we have a window following that date that allows students to talk with more faculty and ensure that they essentially are paired up with someone that they believe they can have a great thesis research project with. So we have a selection process. It's done very carefully to make sure that students feel that they have equal access to the different research projects. And that happens after you arrive, so you don't have to worry about it beforehand.
Okay, great. The next question is, what is the process for determining the industry, company, and role for the practice school component?
So the practice school, actually, which is operated by our faculty member, Alan Hatton, has different industrial sites arranged for each semester. And that all depends on which companies are available to provide a site and the nature of the problem that was found to work on. So students don't select the sites. The sites are determined ahead of time through the practice school. And typically there are 3 or 4 different sites that students are then sent to. Each student gets to experience 2 different sites during their practice school experience.
The next question is, how many electives can a student take as an MSc EP student?
So, oh yes, I think I see Brad answering, but you're on mute. Oops.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, so typically the students will take our 4 core courses, a class on systems, as well as 1 elective in process chemistry. And so that represents the core classes. Then they'll also serve as a TA as part of the experience.
Next question is, what is the expectation of applicants to be well familiar with the publications of their prospective lab choices?
I can answer that. 0. So I think, you know, a couple things are really fantastic about our advisor selection process. One is that you don't have to do the same thing you've done in the past. So when you come here, you know, because again, we're not focusing on research area as a primary criteria for admission, you're not being admitted because you were an expert in a certain thing. You're being admitted because you're excellent. And when you come here, you have complete freedom to make a change of direction. And this is something that's really embraced in the MIT culture. I think, you know, all the faculty members practically make career changes in direction into new research area. It's a thing we do. And we encourage the same thing for you all as students here. You will have a chance as part of the visit. Anyone who's admitted is invited to visit our campus and our department to get to know us, typically in March. And that's a great chance to start exploring some of these people and getting to know a little bit about them in advance. So I do find that oftentimes during that visit, people get intrigued and excited about new topics. And then when they show up in the spring, they have a little bit of an idea, oh, I'm interested in learning more about this. But you should use the process Professor Hammond described for advisor selection as kind of an educational learning journey. There's no expectation of prior knowledge.
The next question is, can you combine programs such as the PPSM material with the PhD CEP management aspect?
You want to take that one, Brad?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that we have ever had a PPSM combined with PhD CEP, but it's technically not prohibited. Most of the PPSM students will choose, well, actually so what happens is you'll choose either PhD or PhD CEP in advance. Once you're admitted, then you'll be considered for admission into the PPSM program. So PPSM is sort of a second step after that. Most of the students historically who've been in PPSM have been traditional PhD applicants, but again, there's no prohibition against PhD CEP PPSM.
The next question is, are there a certain number of publications undergraduates should garner prior to application?
This is, the question is, are there a certain number of papers, was it?
Publications that you would need.
Publications. No, there's, in fact, as Brad so well explained, it's great if you were able to publish a paper as an undergraduate student, but it's definitely not a requirement. You may have had a wonderful research experience and the paper, there's not a paper or the paper hasn't come out yet. So do not worry about those things. Think about how to convey what you learned in your research experience in a way that is effective.
The next question is, would your chances of getting into MIT grad programs be increased if you finished your undergrad with a degree from MIT versus another university?
Yeah, so we don't take our own undergrads into the program. So your chance, if you finished your degree from MIT Chemie, your chances of admission would be 0. So it's the opposite of what you described. Your chances are much higher if you go somewhere else. We firmly believe that students are best served by having a diversity of experiences at different institutions that are all excellent in our field. And so we basically encourage our undergrads to look elsewhere at some of our excellent peers to get another experience, view another aspect of Chemie. So no, we don't favor our own students.
With the exception of the MSCEP program, which does accept MIT Chemie undergrads, but that is a very specific program that is not meant to be conducting any research. And so students would still need to apply just like everybody else and would be considered with all the other applicants.
That's a good transition for the next question. Although the MSCEP is not a master with a research focus, are students allowed to do research at the Institute?
I would assume technically yes, if there was a project that a faculty member was willing to take on an MSCEP student. However, based on the course load that is offered in the first semester and then service to the department as a teaching assistant in the spring semester, and then of course the last semester being actually attending practice school where you're not actually on campus, it would be extremely difficult for an MSCEP student to develop that type of relationship with a lab or a professor. Of course, we never say never, so it is a possibility, but I think it would be incredibly difficult. And if a student is seeking the opportunity to perform research, then they should really consider which of the programs is best for them prior to applying.
The next question is, if my application gets rejected, does that affect future applications?
Matt, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm missing the very beginning of all of your questions.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
If my application gets rejected, does that affect future applications?
No,
No.
you can apply again the next year.
The next question is, will students applying to the MSCEP program also have an interview?
No, we do not have an interview process set up for the MSCEP.
Just scrolling through a couple questions. Some of them are duplicates of previous questions. Will our application be checked as a first come, first served basis?
Technically, what we do is we actually review, the administrative team will review the applicants for completion. And after November 20th, which is when we assume everybody has all of their materials in, they get assigned based on how the committee has set up their reading sections. And obviously that's something that we don't announce to students. Some parts of admissions are private, but you do get, technically, if your application is incomplete, it will not be reviewed until it is complete. So if your whole application is complete as of November 20th with all of your letters of recommendation, it is probable that your application will be reviewed before somebody else who only has one letter of recommendation that's been submitted. So it is in your best interest to have your application be complete by the deadline.
The next question is it recommended or even necessary to contact faculty professors before submitting the application?
I highly recommend that you do not reach out to Chemie faculty. You would, if you were admitted, you'd have the opportunity to meet with all of them. And our first semester of the program really allows students to get to know different faculty members and explore the opportunities within the department. And reaching out in advance won't be helpful because your admission is not tied to whether or not you're able to find an advisor prior to admission. So we have very firm beliefs that students really need to be here and be invested in order to make those decisions for themselves.
Next question is, for the MSc EP program, what is the process of getting into the field stations of the practice school?
I don't know if Paula or Brad want to talk about it, but I could.
Go ahead, Brad.
I was gonna say, I think Professor Hammond addressed this one a little bit under different terminology already when she mentioned that really the practice school director identifies the field stations and they're assigned to students based on the semester in which they'll be in the field. So pretty much the process is you pick, or if you're admitted directly to MSCP, it's usually the summer term that you'll be spending in the field. And then you'll be told at a certain point what the field stations will be. And there are usually two different ones. And so you get to sample a couple of different aspects of the field.
The next question is it possible to work with a PI in a different department?
It is possible when you arrive as a chemical engineering graduate student. We do try to make as many of the opportunities in the Department of Chemical Engineering available to you as a graduate student, but sometimes a student cannot find quite the right fit within the department. They can select an advisor in a different department as long as they have a co-advisor in chemical engineering who will help guide them through the thesis process. So we do that. That is something that is true about MIT, that you can work with PIs from different departments.
The next question is, how many grad students apply and what % of them are admitted each year to the department?
So it varies between 500 and 700 applicants. It's obviously is based on a whole bunch of different factors, but we typically have an admission rate of a little bit under 10%. And that's both for the PhD and for the MSc-EP.
The next question is, what makes an application memorable?
Yeah, so I think the best advice you can give is really go back to those admissions criteria and look at the specific things we're saying, because I think you mean memorable in a positive direction. So look at those admissions criteria and really what we're trying to address, and then look at those hints that Caitlin presented for how to share information in a way that it's effective communication to address those. I think that's really the way to be memorable and to be positively memorable.
What are some of the most common mistakes students make when applying?
I will just say, once you have applied, we request respectfully that you not email us every week for the status of your application. Please be aware that there are so many factors and so many people involved in the admissions process that the over eagerness of some candidates tends to be quite negative. But otherwise, if you have questions about the process, the timeline, where we are in terms of that, then please reach out, but it should be reaching out to the administrative team. That would probably be the best. As for mistakes that they make in their applications, I will let Professor Olson answer.
Yeah, I think, major ones, I would say. So, try to stay relevant to the topics we're discussing is super important. I think Caitlin highlighted a few ways that you can include things that are not relevant. I won't list all of them, but we see a lot of stuff that makes us chuckle that we didn't want to know. And then the second thing I would say is please do edit. That's a super important part of the writing process. And that can make it really difficult for us. If it's difficult to read something, it's just hard to receive the message that you are trying to send. So that's a super important part. And then I would say the last one is I guess, remember where you're applying. So really this fit that Caitlin highlighted should be a fit for MIT Chemie, not, for example, for MIT Physics. And that's actually, believe it or not, a pretty common issue that we have is we get, and I think all our departments have that, is we get applications that were really directed at someone else. So I think if you focus on the advice you've heard in this webinar, I think you'll be able to prepare a really highly relevant application. And the only other piece of advice I would give is building on something Melanie said, and I just want to speak on behalf of our fantastic admissions staff, is that these email addresses look super impersonal and robotic, but they're staffed by human beings who are really trying to help you. And I can testify that they work like 150% overtime throughout the entire admission season to make sure that everyone is as well taken care of as they possibly can. But understandably, everything happens all at once. And so please do be patient with us, and please do be nice to these folks who are manning these things. They're really just there trying to help as best as they can.
Okay, the next one is, will having a fellowship increase the chance of admission?
No, it will not. Technically, all of our students who are admitted into our doctoral programs are fully funded, at least for the first year. For the first year, you have guaranteed fellowship funding. So you don't need to bring in your own fellowship. However, once you are selecting a lab, that can be extremely helpful for professors to know if you have any external awards, and that is when you'd want to really be bringing that information in and showing it off to the professors. But in advance of your actual application, it is not necessary to declare that information. But once you're here, please do let us know. That is something extremely important to the department.
And we should add, so our admissions decisions are made before most of the fellowship decisions are made, at least in the United States, and we don't consider those. And if you're awarded a fellowship after an admissions decision comes down, it's not a cause for appeal. So we won't reconsider the decision after the fellowship decisions are made.
The next question is, are there any exceptions in which an applicant can be admitted in the spring term?
I think the only time we've had an applicant be admitted for the spring term was because he had already completed all of the core courses, which are taught in the fall semester. And he was admitted after completing the MSc-EP and starting the PhD CEP. But that is extremely rare, and it is definitely not something that is considered very often.
We do, though, have a process for deferred admission. So if you're admitted and you wanted to start not in the fall immediately after your application, then you would make an application to us justifying the reason for the deferral. This is not extremely common, It's a couple candidates each year, and it's typically because there's some academic reason to defer admission. So, for example, some of the named fellowships in the United States that are a one-year program, if a student wins one of those, they may defer admission here to receive that fellowship and then come back here a year later. That's a good example of something we would probably approve. But the way that works is basically after you're admitted on a case-by-case basis, you can talk to us about that. And again, it's pretty rare. That's really, I think, one of the only ways you would see a start that's not in the fall immediately after your application. And typically that would just be an exactly 1 year deferral.
The next question is,
Let's make this our last question. Professor Hammond is going to be signing off. So thank you so much, Professor Hammond, for meeting with us. In the meantime, I will put a link to our email address if you have any extra questions. But Matt, let's hear this last question.
if I enroll in the MSc EP program and complete it, can I continue a PhD at MIT?
I mean, you could, but you would need to apply to the PhD program and be admitted. So we do not have a track that bypasses admission. If you complete the MSc EP, you would then need to go through the entire application process again for the PhD program. I think that's all of our questions. What I will do is I will go ahead and pull all of the other questions from Slido and answer them as well as I can. And in the meantime, thank you so much to Caitlin and Professor Olson and Matt for your help. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to chemigrad@mit.edu. We are excited to hear from you and we can't wait to see your applications. All right, take care.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.